we just learned about the Redfin and Zillow partnership. And I only learned about
operative word partnership.
Exactly, yeah. I only learned about it because Nicole was saying that it just happened. She's like, were you aware? I was like, since my walkabout, I've gone dark on everything. I didn't tell you
Good
this.
for you.
But unsubscribing from my amount of
Trump was elected.
I heard of this.
Yeah.
I wasn't totally aware of
make
the
sure
day.
the big stuff you're aware of. Yeah.
I wasn't sure of the day he took office, but I
Okay.
learned he's in power now.
Yeah.
So. So the she mentioned it, and I was like, oh, my unsubscribing of podcasts. That was one of the sad things. It's like, I was super up on all my business podcasts and things, and then as I look at it, it's obvious that my wheel of life that we talked about on a prior episode, it was so slanted towards business because like 70% of my podcasts were business or whatever, and not necessarily like current events. I just had a couple of those, more of the like business building type stuff. And it's kind of sad to see them go, for me to like unfollow each of those podcasts. It's like you're like it's like deleting a friend from your phone. Or something is what it felt like.
Letting go a part of your identity.
Yeah,
we got into that. Yeah.
It'd be nice if you could like archive it and be like, I'll check back in on you later. But the only option I had was to unfollow. Anyway, so I wasn't aware of this, but Nicole mentioned that some of our client services people are starting to get pinged by former clients and current clients that were impacted, and it was just like, this would be a good topic for you guys to jump into. So hence my half-assed internet research on Redfin and Zillow.
Is there a three-quarter half-ass or three-quarter research?
Half an ass?
Half an ass
75% ass?
Yeah. So I don't even know if we're at half yet. But I was informed of this by Trevor. Trevor Park had hit me up, and he knows that we have some positions open, and thought there might be some folks over there that are impacted that we'd be interested in talking to. So, and what I heard from him was that a good portion of the rent dot agency was impacted. At least that was my understanding, which is surprising. They've become not one of our bigger competitors, but they're certainly competing with digital services. And it seems still somewhat early stages, but, how long do you think it's been? Probably 4 or 5 years since they've gotten air quotes serious, because I know that they were dabbling, but it feels like they've been pushing hard for the last 4 or 5 years. And so therefore, hearing about this partnership and the impact, I think it's 450 employees is what's right now on the internet as far as folks impacted, but it doesn't really say within what division, but it sounds like most of it is on Rent Dot versus, within Zillow or Redfin. And so I can't imagine that they have much more than maybe 700 to 1,000 employees. I could be way off there. But needless to say, it's a huge portion of formerly known as Apartment Guide, rebranded as Rent Dot, that have been impacted. And so immediately I'm, of course, like all of us, wondering why. It's got to be because it's, the stock price, and this is something that they felt was going to drive shareholder value, but that's pretty surface level, So I'm curious. This is what it's about, right? Let's speculate, but can you, where I'll probably go with this eventually, as far as why I think this might have happened. But
yeah, let's hit the top line. So the first news that we saw announced was just that Zillow is going to become the exclusive
multifamily inventory for Redfin. So all Redfin units will now be syndicated through Zillow.
Yeah.
Which puts them in a little bit more competitive. They didn't say anything about this, but with CoStar.
Yeah. I'm curious about your current thoughts about, I even start to feel gross about saying AI, because there's so much I feel like I need a different word. It's let's just say that where technology is going, Wendell, sure. And how you think it's maybe applicable now, but then kind of maybe that sort of like the near future, the mid future, the far future. So what's on your mind with where tech's going?
Yeah, I think when it comes to technology, I think the word that you didn't want to say was AI.
Yes.
And with artificial intelligence, it's been on the top of mind for almost everyone, I think. Everyone in this industry, as well as folks who are looking to invest in this industry as well. I think everyone has a misconception about AI. One of the misconceptions that I've seen lately is that the second you turn on AI, you save $1 right away. In my opinion, I don't think you do. Practically speaking, if you turn on AI, it's because you have a pain point. So, for example, you have a team or an on-site team that can't handle all the calls. They're missing maybe 50% of the calls. So you turn on leasing AI, right? Well, what do you think happens when you turn on leasing AI and now they're answering 100% of the calls? You think workload will go down or go up? And in reality, it goes up. So I think the misconception is that AI will save you money from the beginning, and it doesn't. I think what AI will do really is find opportunities. Opportunities have been missed, neglected, ignored. And once you turn on AI, boom, opportunities hit, and then you start to see more value, right? And then from there, yes, there will be a time, but it'll be a curve. It'll start high in the beginning and then over time stabilize, and you'll be able to start saving money throughout, because you'll find not just direct ways to save money, like, for example, renting apartments, but all the other ways. Vacancy loss, reducing turns, even delinquency. I mean, there's so many other GLs that get affected by AI that everyone's just focusing on one area, which is renting.
Yeah. And then at that director level, oftentimes it seems like those folks are going on pitches to win new clients and things.
Yeah.
And so maybe talk about how your vendors or partners, I mean, I more think of vendor and than partner, but you guys keep saying partner. Just talk about how those other folks can help with that process and where, because I'll like seed the conversation a little bit, but sometimes I got the impression that the property management person may be afraid to ask for help because they're like, well, I think I'm going to use you, but that may change depending on how the conversation goes. So I don't want to make you do hours that you're not going to bill me for because you can't bill me for it.
Yeah.
In order, but in our view, we'd rather try to help and then understand that, like, then it's on our radar if it's coming. And then we also are more in tune to the market. What does the owner want? What helps you win? And then if we don't get it, that's fine. That's cool. We'll get the next one or whatever.
Yeah.
Meaning, like, even if you win the business, but you don't give it to us, that's fine. So anyways, if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and you say vendor, and I say vendor too, but I always love to say vendor partner because, again, it's a partnership. If you really are doing it right, I think it's a partnership. But if I hear you 110%, and I think it's nobody wants to ask somebody to do free work, and I hear that, but I think sometimes they don't think about it in the perspective that you just outlined, which is just like we get asked to pitch for new business from a third-party management perspective, do we ever turn that down? No, and even if it's not us, it doesn't end up being us. It was an opportunity to prove what we have to bring to the table. And I think people, again, draw the parallel. You guys are doing the same thing. So yes, it's free work and you're going to give us some stuff and it might not come back to you, but ultimately in the end, it gets you out there. And I think, when we've ever had situations like this or scenarios like this, I do try to say, like, hey, this is a portfolio that we might be taking over. Like, we need some data points here. Help us understand these markets. We don't work in them currently. Like, we need some more insights. And what can you provide to me? And you know what? At the end of the day, if we don't get the deal, then yeah, obviously Digible doesn't get the deal. But it's better to work together, and like you said, you can uncover the needs of the client. Like the digital agency can say, like, okay, now I understand how this process works for them a little bit more, and then let's start thinking about how we can support them in this and make this easier for them as opposed to harder. But I think it's hard because, again, people don't want to ask for free work. And
it could be like, hey, we pitched, and then we realized that this ownership group has their preferred partner, and so be it. But what we got out of that conversation, what they love about their preferred partner is X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
So thank you for the help. Sorry it didn't work out this time, but now you know, like, what attracted them, and if something goes wrong, guess what? We'll mention you.
Yeah.
And then if it's something where it's like they like X, Y, and Z from that partner, but you don't do it, then it's like maybe that's then a conversation to say, like, okay, could we overcome that or whatever if the time came?
Yeah, for sure. I think we've done this tons over the years. Nicole and I would talk regularly, and I'd say, hey, you guys aren't doing this right now. Like, is there any possibility? Is this on the roadmap? Have you even thought about this? And even David, like when we used to have our regular chats, like I would just be like, are you guys ever going to do something like this? You know? And it's just good to ask questions. And I think what you guys have always been very good at, and I think other agencies can model after you, is that you want to understand the whole ecosystem of what we go through on our side. You've asked me plenty of questions about pitches over the years. You're like, so how does this work? Like, give me the play by play. Like, how do you prepare for it? What do you do when you go in? Like, what's talked about in the room? And I think you guys have done a great job at asking those questions to understand what the process looks like, and then say like, okay, well, we can help with that. Like, you're going to do a competitor analysis, like let us help you with that. We can look up in, Keyword Planner, what's going on in this metro market or whatever. So I think that's something that, like, again, ask questions. Like, digital agencies can model that after digital and say, like, help me understand what you are going through so I can see where maybe I can fulfill a need.
Nicole, anything else on director before we move to the corporate side?
I'm glad you brought up pitches, because we were kind of thinking about that earlier, of like, we have gotten more exposure to like what happens on that pitch. And just like our business, there's in this period of maybe quietness or darkness of like, we're now invested, right? I'm invested in, did we win this portfolio or this property? And then there's this lull, and then maybe we get surprised of like, oh, now it needs to launch tomorrow. And just like, when our team goes out and does a pitch, it's all about timing, and like there's different timings for different companies. And so I think just having that relationship will help understand more of that timing of like, oh, okay, we didn't hear back, or, oh, they're actually pushing this to Q3 or Q4. And like the timeline is kind of the wild card variable that as true as a partnership is, that's what you can control. And so I would just advise of like just having those open lines of communication and ask, and don't be afraid to ask. Like, hey, you flew out to Florida, last month. How'd that go? Yeah. And like keeping that open so that you can prepare on both sides.
Yeah. And again, I think that goes back to like, proactive communication. And this will segue well into the VP level.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think like truly when you start to think about that VP corporate level, typically this person is overseeing a team or a department for the entire company. And that might stretch a couple states, or that might stretch the entire country or the globe, right? And so I think thinking about those higher level discussions about support, communication, how do we streamline things? How do we, kind of centralize some of these pieces? How can we make this easier on both sides, right? And so, for example, we work with Digible across the country. Somebody in the Midwest wants to sign up, and somebody in the Mid-Atlantic wants to sign up, and somebody in Florida wants to sign up. Okay, well, they have their individual account managers, and that's wonderful, but why should each of those account managers be chasing down 3 different people to get tracking information? Can we centralize that? Can we say, hey, the corporate team can help you with this? And so bring it all to us. We'll get you all of what you need. And what it does is it alleviates a burden from the regional marketing team. They no longer have to think about that and say, oh man, I didn't request tracking, because somebody on the corporate side's already done it for them. And then, on the agency side, it makes it a lot easier. Everything's coming from one place. So when you don't get the answer, you can just go back to that one place and say, hey, I need help with this. And this is actually something that I talk about on my monthly calls with all of my agencies. Is like, hey, are you having issues getting in contact with anyone? Are you having issues getting answers from anybody?
Great question.
Anything?
That's a great question.
Yeah, and it's like, hey, okay, the person over here might be really busy. You know what? Let me see what I can do about that for you. Let me see how I can help facilitate. I know they're swamped. I know they just had a takeover. They got a new rebrand going. So let me just connect with them and see if maybe there's a better point of contact for us to reach out to. Or what is it that you need? Maybe I can help you. Right? I have access to all the systems. I can get you reporting. I can get you, connected with Yardi if necessary. Let's work together. And so I think that's something like from the corporate perspective, it becomes more, and the partnership builds because it becomes more about streamlining everything and that communication. And again, it goes into that process of like, help me help you.
You think about all these AI tools that are coming down, and some people will say, is it going to pull strategists out of the workforce? And for me, it's like, it can do things, but it doesn't have context.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is so important, like the context that goes into how you're optimizing and knowing the business, knowing the needs of your client and those goals is so important. A machine can only do so much. It can't think for you. It can't think about your long-term goals. It can't work through multiple implications. And so for me, that's the way that I think about a strategist is our role will slightly change. Yes, we won't just be like pulling levers and pushing buttons. We'll actually be able to spend more time on that strategy piece as opposed to just working hands on keys and pulling levers, making builds. Like it kind of takes the monotony out of it and gives you more time to have like strategic thinking.
To be a human.
Yeah. To have that human oversight and have that context.
Well, this seriously could be its own podcast. So love that you went there. Let's try to make room for just two more hot takes or things that you think need to be, again, unlearned or rethought relative to paid media strategy and multifamily. And I don't know if this is even, if you want to take the bait on this, but you mentioned Bing a couple times. People made fun of me, I think, in the first few years of Digible because I was constantly bringing up Bing. And it was more just, I'm not the one running the campaigns, haven't been, but trying to be past the point of like, if the cost per click, and I know it doesn't always mean cost per conversion. I mean, that's the very surface vanity metrics in a way, but is so much cheaper on Bing. Why aren't more multifamily marketers putting some budget there? Or why aren't they even starting there? If the return on ad spend is inherently lower. And what I heard back, just to kind of set you up, is it's there's a lack of, like, it doesn't have the same kind of, I guess, features. It also doesn't, as you were talking about, the amount of data that Google has. And so if you were only looking at the financial, I'll call it, equation, it's easy to think Bing first or include Bing. But when you actually get down to the campaign results, you often don't see a better outcome. I don't feel like anybody's actually validated that for me, because I know Digible has tested some, but not much there. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if this is a good setup for you, if you feel strongly about this, but yeah, what are your thoughts as an expert and in multifamily, where or if to use Bing?
I've seen hit or miss results on Bing. I think when you're looking at the mammoth that Google is, like everyone goes to Google for search. I think that's kind of probably the leading reason why people aren't on Bing as much, or if they have limited budgets, they just look at the audience on Google being so much wider. And that's probably a reason why. In the same vein.
But can I
you can
challenge you a little bit on that? It's performance based.
Yeah.
So what difference does it make? Whether there's way more people searching on Google, mm-hmm. What difference does it make if the cost model is performance based? So I only pay if you click on my ad, whether it's on Bing or on Google. And so
that's the case for search.
Yeah.
But for display, you're paying for impressions.
All right. Well, you pivoted. You're moving us to display. But when it comes to search, that argument for me doesn't, I can't let that one.
I hear you.
Yeah.
I will say, like, Bing is expanding its offerings too. They have a display network now. They are also adding in a Performance Max type campaign. I think it's familiarity too. People are familiar with Google. They know what they get. It also integrates directly with Google Analytics. So they feel very confident in that track back and actually having actionable data there as well. And
so how do you handle the analytics then? That's a great point. Not one that I actually had heard before, but as far as why Google is the direct connection, to the analytics. So
a lot of people use Google Analytics or GA4 because it's a free platform. And so I think if you're using internal data and back-end data, it doesn't matter where the lead comes from. If you use correct UTM tracking, you can track what platform it came off of within your CRM system if there's compatibility there. But generally speaking, I think Bing is untapped. There are opportunities there. I would never turn it down from testing, but I would want the data to speak for it, right? So if we're just not seeing the same number of leads or the same quality of leads, that would be something I'm far more interested in than say, I'm going to be more willing to spend more on a quality lead than just trying to hit a lower bottom line for what I'm spending. So that would be something I would be interested in looking into.
Yeah.
And it brings the wider question of, how do we qualify a lead? How do we indicate that it's a quality lead? How do we get it to a lead to lease portion at any point? So I think that's more of a longer term discussion and evaluating the traffic that we're bringing in.
Yeah. Well, I didn't quite let you answer, so I'm going to let you answer. Is there something else that you would call out as a big opportunity for this industry to maybe rethink or unlearn relative to paid media strategy?
I think we talked about many of them that we've talked in the past. So the biggest being just rethinking how we're testing. With the smaller testing budgets, it can be really difficult to create actionable insights. So, and actually isolate what is causing the increase in performance. And so I would say really evaluating how we're looking at testing and quantifying wins, and really trying to be strategic with testing programs and saying this is something that could benefit the portfolio overall versus on a property by property basis. And so how are we approaching that to say we're investing these ad dollars and we can see a huge increase in performance across many of our properties versus we're testing on this one platform for this one property and we're seeing wins here. Yes, I do see value in that. But if we're looking to scale in a greater way in the long term, like having those wider and greater testing programs that are more, I guess, incremental, so they build off of each other as well, is really important.
Yeah.
So Jordan, with an asset like that is so unique, I wouldn't just say for Canada, but for almost any asset we've ever worked with, how do you decide what to focus on? Like how, when you're marketing it, like, am I doing the basketball court? Am I doing the childcare would be important to us right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. It really depends on the stage of where we're at in development, because there's certain things that are available to us at different times. So right now we're really leaning into our renderings to really show off the amenity portfolio. We have a beautiful evening rendering of our amenity terrace, and it has this circular infinity pool that we just showcase everywhere, because it really gives you a sense of the scale of this one section of the community. But still such a striking contrast, especially when you're out in the in public. It really, that dark contrast with the bright pool really stands out, and it's pretty eye-catching. So that's at the kind of outset of the lease up is what or pre-leasing period is what we're leaning toward, is our amenity package. And as different assets become more available, once we go through and do model suite photography and those things, then we kind of just mix it in, and we make different advertisements geared toward different benefits of the community. But yeah, typically just leaning into our amenities that really showcase well visually, because we do have some really great renderings of the basketball court as well. But I think the basketball court is one of those things that is going to speak volumes when you're in it, just because it has the floor to ceiling 2-story windows that face directly onto the highway, which doesn't sound super glamorous when you say it, but when you're in there, there's something about the moving traffic, but you're in this like quiet space, and the 2-story windows, it's just so striking. You get such a huge, the size of the room itself is just so impactful that's a space where I really think no rendering will really do it justice until the prospects are in there. So just kind of picking and choosing and working with what we have available at the time.
Yeah, makes sense. It's super interesting. I'm almost like, I can imagine it being a different marketing play, because you have to bring prospects along this journey, right? So it's like, maybe it's kind of table stakes on the first image you show them. They're expecting the pool, you got to show the pool, right? And then you're like, okay, but let me pull you in and actually show you what else we have and have you feel it, versus potentially if you lead with that, maybe it doesn't connect right away. And so I feel like there's more of like a storytelling renter path or resident prospect path here, that you really have to kind of engage them at each step of the cycle.
Most definitely. And with this community especially, it's not a very well-known rental node. So we've been navigating a challenge of trying to educate people about this, what's the word I'm looking for? Just having product in this space and the benefits of this community, and kind of writing that narrative of what it means to live in, not what it means, but why people should choose that community to live. It's still, and we're really looking at it as, it's the best of both worlds. You have all the retail, the entertainment, the transit connection, both either on public transit or through driving in the highway, because it's right along that 401 stretch. And so commuters living within the GTA or working in and around the GTA that maybe want to be close to the city have that option. And so really striking that narrative to try to inspire people to choose to move there.
Start opening up your data kimono. Hopefully I'm not the only one that's ever used the expression open kimono. I don't think so. This is it's so important in order to optimize a marketing strategy that whoever your support, I'll just say either vendors or your team is that's putting together the strategy, almost always it involves third party. And so I'm going to use us because it's easy, Digible. And if you're not providing and opening up that data kimono to us so that we have access, and I'm going to use just an easy but maybe shocking example, but ILS data, then we're at a disadvantage. We're surely at a disadvantage if we don't have property data, if we don't have some of the local insights that are coming from the property manager. This is where we get a little into the anecdata, but just there's so much data for one property, and more often than not that we could be using that we are not. And I don't think it's usually intentional. Sometimes it is, and I don't know if that's driven, and I don't want to be, I guess, naive about this, but about some of the legal, I guess, kind of parameters around data. But this, I'm not in any way talking about personally identifiable information. What I am speaking about is the data that has no residence name on it or is fully anonymized. But I'm also talking about hyperlocal insights. I'm talking about other meaningful data sets that could and likely would contribute to a better strategy. But when you are operating more in a siloed nature, where you kind of move from one, let's say, vendor to the next, or one platform to the next, inevitably you're going to reduce, the efficacy of that marketing campaign. And so you're more likely to draft, is maybe a better way of putting this. Think NASCAR for anybody that's a fan, of getting all of your data in a line. It's going to work a lot better for you, and you're going to see better performance than if it's real disparate and disconnected, which is unfortunately, I think, fairly common for us right now in the industry. So again, open up that data kimono, share it with as many people as you can in the right way, legally, and I think you're going to see a lot better results. All right, so we're going to wrap this up now. I think that was the first 7. So recapping the start defining what failure looks like, not just success. Important there is that you know when to move on, so you don't get stuck kind of just in between with a lot of your experimentation and your media. Start making your content smart. I'll say not ignorant, and that just means make sure as much data as possible is informing what you're putting up online, whether that's Google Business Profile, whether that's in your paid media campaigns, whether it's in your social media. And then start opening up that data kimono. That's what I just wrapped with, but the more data that you can share with your partners that are aiming, kind of have that shared mutual purpose of lead generation, the more likely you are to find success, to have great results. All right, we're in the home stretch. These last 3 are going to be what I would like to see our multifamily marketers in the industry at large continue. So that means we're at number 8, and I'm going to start with continuing prioritizing integrations. And sorry if this is a Captain Obvious moment, but the more that the industry together keeps talking about this, the better. Because there's just a ceiling to how far a marketing campaign or strategy can go if the data is not, if there's not enough data supporting it. And so I, obviously just wrapped with the importance of sharing data and mentioned the example of the content being smart versus ignorant. And so much of that hinges on those data integrations. So I'm not sure there's much more to do than continue to push your vendors, advocate for this. Obviously, there's, we'll say, kind of a bigger issue or challenge sometimes with some of the larger prop tech and being able to get access to that. But there are, I don't want to say hacks, but, there's still ways to get that data, through. But ultimately, integrations obviously is where it's at. And it's going to make everything drive a lot more smoothly. You're going to see a lot better business outcomes. Moving on to number 9. So going to show here, my jinky basketball finger. This one is continue asking tough questions, hard questions. And so this is something that's really been great, I think, for Digible, speaking from a firsthand experience. But the questions that we got 2 or 3 years ago, certainly 5 or 6 years ago, have shifted dramatically for the better, meaning far more advanced. And I think that's a credit to a lot of things, but certainly the industry in general, who we're bringing in, who we're putting in these roles. And it's also, how competitive the space has gotten. But it's no longer acceptable to have a surface level understanding of paid media. Paid search is an easy one. Now the questions that we often will get in our monthly reporting calls are way more prescriptive, way more detailed, challenging so much of what we do. And I think there was almost a jolt, brief stretch for us where it's like, where is this coming from? And maybe not, I guess, embracing it as much as, I think we should. Fortunately, that's shifted for Digible. And right now, I think we're in this almost honeymoon stage of on both sides where it's like there's just these really rich, deeper conversations about strategy. And it's a two-way street. That's the only way that happens. And I think naturally the outcome of that is always going to be better results, always going to be better results. It's going to be better context. It's going to be better conversations that ultimately our marketers will carry back to owners, to operators, to investors, if those questions are more thoughtful, just love it. Keep doing it. We're all getting better from it. All right. Last one. This is marketing principle number 10. This one is continuing to rethink, not let go. I emphasize that, not necessarily let go of your ILS strategy. So I know there's been plenty of discussion, and you see it, I feel like at least one panel at every marketing conference talks about the use case or case study of being able to move off of, ILS and move more towards building their either own version of that or moving a lot more of their advertising, if not all of their marketing dollars, over to digital advertising and marketing. And sometimes that does make sense. That is part of rethinking. So again, continue doing that. But something that now I'm hearing more recently that I think is great, sign, signal, and should continue is, okay, I am going to keep spending actually on ILS, but I'm going to get more prescriptive, more sophisticated with how I approach that. And that falls in line with what I was just saying as far as continue to ask those really hard questions. And that was pointed more at agencies like Digible, but it's also at those ILSs. And I think what you'll find or have we've been hearing is that there's more room, both frankly to negotiate, but also optionality in how you're approaching this than maybe you experienced in the past. But if you're not asking the questions, if you're not pushing that conversation forward, then naturally you're going to miss that opportunity. Let me give you an example, though, of how we've rethought, but also this has been very much driven by some of the data that we've seen that we've shared, I think, at least once or twice on this podcast, relative to how you might look differently at an ILS strategy. This is I'm going to use this comparison of a dating website, but if you were to post a profile on Match.com and you were to say, I am interested in humans that are human adults that are over 3 feet tall, you're going to likely get flooded, right? With, well, maybe not. Maybe that would freak somebody out if they actually saw that was your only requirements. But my point is that you'll get inundated or could, with prospects. Now think just the opposite. I go to Match.com and I put up a profile and I invest, the time to put in all sorts of keywords, as well as interests, just loaded up with information about me as a person and what I am looking for, what do you think the volume is going to look like? Just the opposite, right? But the people that do probably find me, so this is the important part, are ones that are way more qualified, right? That might be a good match for me. Very similar in the way you could think about or rethink your ILS strategy is when you are thinking about even a lease up, but certainly this applies for those that are stabilized or maybe a little bit further along. How important is it for you to get just sheer volume versus quality? And so given that most consumers, when they do get onto these ILSs, and probably not telling anybody anything they don't know, but pay attention, really think about this, are coming in and filtering. So if I go to apartments.com, there's a very good chance that I'm going to say, here's what my budget is, here's the neighborhood that I'm interested in, here's the school systems, the safety, whether there's pets, etc. By the time I get through that process, you will quickly notice that your options go from super wide to super small. So in thinking about your ILS strategy, knowing that that's the way the user experience typically goes when it comes to these ILSs, how important is it for you to just have maximum exposure? What I think is smarter is to kind of have a bottoms up strategy where it's like, I'm really going to focus on quality and then tease out different options to get me to my sweet spot of volume plus quality. But it's a lot more difficult, and sometimes contracts are very difficult to get around if you start wide instead of, if you start deep instead of wide. So a lot less room for you to pivot, to explore options. And this also allows you, typically, if you start kind of more bottoms up, thinking again of that typical user experience, where you can actually add more buys. And what collectively is likely to happen is through being on 4 or 5 different ILSs, and yes, again, granting that there's been some consolidation, but trust me, there's still plenty of options out there. If you're on if you take a wider approach, but you're making sure that you're using the right keywords, the right images, optimizing as much as you can your profiles or your listings on those different directories, collectively, that can add to a similar, if not better number than just choosing one ILS and going for a higher level sponsorship. And the beauty of it is that more often than not, those are going to be more qualified leads, right? Because it actually was a little harder to find you, not easier, in a good way. So I hope that all makes sense, but just something, there's a lot more today rethinking of ILS strategy, and I think that's great. Just keep doing that, but I wouldn't necessarily encourage people to just let go of it and see if they can make a run without it, but I know that that's worked for plenty of properties too, and PMCs. So, you just gotta experiment, you gotta test things out.
So I'm not asking you as an expert of multifamily marketing exactly how you would approach that, but since you said you have kind of best practices, some tactics that you think are applicable to just about any brand, how would you approach, and now I will give you somewhat of the challenge that faces these marketers and these owners, is when 20 new Class A beautiful buildings are opening up in downtown Denver, how would you go about trying to carve out an identity or a unique brand with such similarities?
So the way that I always look at this is that people don't buy the product, people buy the person, they buy the story. So if you're building out your multifamily strategy, or if you're building out any product strategy, it's about the person that is creating it and the journey that they can bring people on. This is for B2B, this could be for B2C. The reason why I know this to be true is because look at some of the biggest names in just like global business. They carved their own brand within there that gave them their kind of edge, gave them their uniqueness, and that's what people cling on to. Whether you like some of the big names or not in the industry, like let's say if you look at like a Tesla, even if you looked at like Tim Cook, Steve Jobs back in the day, when he was coming out with products, yes, it was new, unique, novel, 100%, but they liked his kind of weird quirkiness. And I think what's interesting is when you were younger, you were probably slapped on the wrist for having like a weird take on things in school, like as a kid. But as you're older, that becomes your unique point of differentiation in the market. This is the unique thing, that all the things that you don't think are good is what people cling on to. So the saying I like to say with this is that your rough edges allows people to cling on to something with you. So if you're too polished and too basically trying to be perfect, that actually deters people. So the scenario with my story is that before I was 23, I had 3 failed businesses. I run an events company, I ran an e-commerce company, and I ran a tech startup before I was 23. I tell that story because it's valuable for other people, whether they're old, young, and they're like, oh, this guy's normal. He's not a robot. And that's valuable because if I'm trying to pull people along into what I'm doing, into my world, they get attracted to it. So if you look at even some of the biggest names in real estate, they just share a lot of their own personal stories a lot of the time. And they actually bring in aspects of their life. And as a result, that's what builds the strong brand. Now, it is non-negotiable that you need to be excellent at what you do. So if you're selling a multifamily story building down the middle of Denver, of course, there needs to be everything in place. Everything needs to be perfect in terms of the property. But there comes a point whereby competency actually has a cap. So I think a lot of people, when they're creating content online, they try to become extremely competent at what they're doing. But the funny thing is competency has like a limiter. The other component to this is actually warmth. So if you look at some of the best speakers in the world, or even entrepreneurs who have a large brand, they're very warm. People like speaking with them and like kind of communicating with them, following them, because it's a non-negotiable that they're competent. And at some point, then a lot of the content that they create that helps grow their business is basically, do I like this person? Now, equally, someone can look at your content and look at how you're building your brand and say, that's not for me. That's okay. That's actually totally okay. You almost want that. So, because I think polarization with content and with brand, people look at it as a bad thing, but it's actually a good thing, right? So for me, there's just some hard rules that I have, which is like I'm a content first business. I know many people who are like a paid ads first business. We are just the opposite of that. Does that make sense? And that attracts who? People who have the same values as me. So I think if you are looking to do huge things in your business or amplify what you have, there is no disadvantage to basically building a brand that's aligned to who you are based on technical ability and based on your personal values.
Talk to me about, what now opinion, like what does the pie chart look like? And it doesn't have to mean in revenue or customers per se, but like, what are you seeing like more often than not, people finding value buying into the company? And then, give me the full spectrum. Like what all do you guys provide?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, and kind of taking a step back, I might go a couple approaches here. And so if I do, bring me back around.
Yeah.
But yeah, we started very much in reviews, and that still is I wouldn't say our core product, but it's still core to what we do. But it's an element of what we do. And so if we take a step back, I mean, we started with reviews, but then we got into this problem that we started to realize, like you get a 150 unit community over a year period, we're going to ask for reviews for that, but there's not a ton of turnover happening in that, because if you've got, 90-something% occupancy rate, you've got a really great community, you can only ask people for reviews so many times.
Sure.
And so for us, we had to naturally evolve into say, hey, how do we stay relevant for this property? How do we stay relevant for the manager, for the ownership group? How do we stay relevant on top of it? And that's really where the satisfaction piece was born out of, right? Because now we wanted to start measuring different events that were happening in the property so we could remain relevant. And so we added, okay, well, let's start measuring the tour, and let's start measuring the move-in process, and let's start moving the maintenance process, and then let's do the renewal process and the move-out process, which we still do now and a couple other items in between there. But then even that started to get stale, because how often do people tour and move in? Tours a little more often, but again, high occupancy, you're not doing a ton of tours. The move-in process, if high occupancy, you're not doing a ton of move-ins.
Yeah.
Move-out's the same. And so we started to add, okay, well, how do we add another additional layer to this? And then we started to add our quarterly, basically, similarly to, you guys might do this here. Do you survey your residents or your employees on their ENPS score?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So quarterly, we do the same thing as well. We ask, how likely are you to recommend this to a friend, right? So we do the same thing on a quarterly basis to the residents, and we're also collecting data at the same time. And so that really was kind of the inception of, okay, we've got all this review data, and now we've got all this internal data. What are we going to do with it?
Yeah.
And so we started to centralize all that together. And so if we take a step back and we look at all of this data and what it can do for us, that it can actually provide direction on what you should do in your business on a quarter-to-quarter basis, on your move-ins, on your maintenance. Our maintenance product, for example, when we're measuring maintenance, we're not only measuring like the experience of that, but we're actually measuring the employee score as well. So you can start to pinpoint and now make decisions within your business of what you should do. And saying, okay, hey, Mary and Jane and Thomas are great, but Roger needs some work because all of his maintenance scores are sub 3 out of 5, right? And so we started to do all that. So we started to get in this place where we're more data centralization, and we're starting to bring all this data together. And AI really changed the game for us on that. So we started to say, okay, instead of just doing the word cloud that everybody has and pulling out some of these keywords, we could actually start to go through and analyze all of this data. And so that's what we started to do. So we built our insights product to be able to do this. And then we just started to layer in more product, right? And so now as a company, we do reviews. We also do that satisfaction piece. We have referrals. We also have a social product that'll post to all your social media, but it's also, you got a lot of conversation happening in your social media. So anything that's happening on Facebook and Instagram and in your DMs and all that other stuff, that's all coming back into our dashboard. And then we start to measure our surveys specific, because a lot of people still want old school surveys, right? And so those are a lot
They do?
Yeah. Better believe it. Yeah. It's
I'm half joking. Yeah. That does track actually.
So we start to add some of all of these different products together. And what we started to realize is that if you go to buy, you can go buy your review product from, I'll drop competitors here, Bird Eye, Reputation.com. You can do that. And I'm not saying they're bad products at all. I'm not going to, dip on my competition or anything like that. But you can also go buy surveys from Kingsley or Ellis or SurveyMonkey. You can go buy some of your satisfaction products, right? Those are a little more competitive. So, but we know if you do a quick Google search, you can see who kind of our competitors are on that. But what's happening here is when all of your data is in all these different places, it's really fragmented. It's really hard to bring it together. And so that's exactly what Opinion is doing now, is we're bringing together all of these different pieces together so that we can start to provide more predictive resident intelligence for your specific property, for your region, for your portfolio, and we're bringing all that together into one. And so, which kind of leads into why Rent Grata. Why was that a piece that we needed, and why was that a central piece too, and why was that attractive to us? So we talked about kind of the touch points that Opinion has, but we only got tour to move out, tour to renewal, and then we usually call it renewal or move out, right? So that whole process, where Rent Grata allowed us to do, is to have the conversations that are happening pre-tour from the prospect level. So not only can we pinpoint, because before we could kind of pinpoint, okay, what's great about the tour? Why are people moving in? Why are people moving out? On some of that, but we never could pick out why are people moving in specifically. What conversations are happening in the buy cycle? We were getting it pretty much after the buy cycle. Other than the tour, which we were more rating like, the manager within the tour process. We weren't really getting to the almost to the thought process behind like what's the buy cycle look like, and that's where Rent Grata adds that conversational piece to the data layer that we're trying to all put together into one. So it allows us to cover more of the resident experience, and it gives us another element or another piece of data that we can layer into, be able to predict, okay, how likely is this person to move in? How likely are they to sign a lease? And all that's coming together now. I mean, we're pretty early in the acquisition, and so product's still coming together. We're still trying to centralize all of our data from their piece into ours. But that's a lot of the reason why we purchased them in the first place.
Super cool. And I see the vision. It's not a small one, as far as bringing all those kind of different vectors of intelligence, like resident intelligence, all into one platform, and then ultimately turning that into predictive, analytics, which I think's, just super cool.
Most folks have sort of fallen into a set it and forget it strategy when it comes to creative, because they don't have the budget to do creative changes or just unexpected expenses. It's like, oh, didn't we handle that during the lease up process? Like, and I had video with like renderings. Like, am I really gonna do like a full shoot now? So I think that's really interesting about what you guys are doing, but it's more like a creative subscription. So could you talk more about that?
And I had someone ask me about that today. She said, well, do you come out and shoot this video content? Well, no, not it's mostly AI driven. So AI gets us about 80% of the way there. But if you've tried to create anything with AI, it's not perfect. It is evolving, it's getting better. But you might have 11 fingers on your person in your video. Like that part isn't perfected just yet. So AI gets us about 80% of the way there. The humans on our team, we have about 16, 17 people dedicated. This is all they do is they're polishing up those videos. They get it the other 20% of the way there. And the subscription model, what that is, it starts at 12 videos a year, so 1 video per month. So you're basically getting 1 new video or 1 new commercial, if you want to refer to it that way, for your property every single month. And that you don't have to you're not using those all at once, but you have this content then in your library. Right now I'm going to use video number 1, but I have something clear through, let's say, September of this year, depending on our seasonality is about to change in this industry. I might have a new property that goes up next to me and I'm trying to combat that. So there are all different things that you can use a video subscription to overcome.
Makes total sense. I mean, we had talked to Scott at Jonah about this years ago, but on their website platform, they had made it so that you can have images change out based on like it's summer versus winter, because people are more interested in the pool, obviously in the summer, not in the winter. And so you would want the same with video assets.
Yeah. So that's what this marketer today was asking me about. And she said, well, but we don't have a lot of content. She was asking, do we come out and shoot it? And I was explaining, no, that we use AI for the majority of that. But she said, so we'll use a variety of your own images that you already have, take things from your website. If you've got some video, if you've got B-roll video, if you've got drone footage, we can certainly work with that, and that's great. Makes it even better. But she said, well, what if we only have so many pictures of our pool? And so if we want to highlight our pool in one of these commercials, how do you guys change that out if we're just showing the same thing? And I was explaining, it's not just the images, but it's your voiceover. It's how you're talking about and positioning that specific amenity, and some cool things that you can do with AI. Justin and I have done this on the AI Exchange, where we had someone who had just a rendering of a pool. It was a new lease up, a new construction building, and they had this image of the pool, and we just used AI to make the water in the pool move. So now it looks like a video. It looks like they have this other piece of content.
Super cool.
And no one came out there to do that. So you can really zhuzh up some things, is what Justin likes to say, and make it look a little different. And I also told her, you can use one shot of your pool, and maybe this is your commercial that you're running in the winter, and your talk track is all about, hey, we know the weather's bad now, but this is what you have to look forward to when spring rolls around in Minnesota or somewhere that's really heavy winters, right? And then in the summer, you're running another ad and you can still highlight your pool, but what you're talking about in the summer is, all of the activities and events you have at your pool, more the lifestyle around it versus, hey, this is what picture yourself here in July kind of thing. So you can use the same image, but you position it and talk about it in a different way.
I talked about bubble test. You heard that too. Yeah. It's not a Muskogee and maybe that it's as big of a risk, but it's like, forget all the noise, all the reasons that your head's telling you not to, or other people are telling you not to, and just test it, but test it inside, know, of a little bubble, and using some of the IDEO stuff. They have the approach of testing ideas, $100 in an hour or less. Love that. Forces you to think so differently, but you can come up with some radical ideas and not put yourself, because I think probably the reasons there's not more Muskogees in the world, and certainly in our industry, is people are afraid they're going to get fired.
Yep.
They're just afraid of the consequences. So can you still put a Muskogee out there and it not be $1 million bet?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things, like I'm trying to forget or trying to remember where I got this, but like most consulting firms, like the really big ones, what they'll do is they'll have like, here's my standard thing. And then they'll kind of have the jackpot slide or the like Yahtzee slide at the end and be like, that you just sort of sometimes say like, oh yeah, no, yes, our normal engagement's $10,000 a month, but we got the $100,000 a month thing. And people are like, what the hell? And then once in a while it strikes, right? So this I view as kind of like you could do that with your ownership groups. You could always have your Yahtzee slide or whatever at the end, and it's
Yahtzee
like
slide.
somebody's gonna like be like, you know what, I'm gonna take it for a swim or whatever, drive, whatever. You're going with me.
I think it's probably drive. Yeah.
So another one that I think could be really interesting too would be it's almost like a try before you buy. I was it's like we just bought our house last year, and I saw it 2 times I think before we put the offer in, but that was a lot because the market has felt very hot here in Colorado. So to be able to see something twice that you're going to spend a lot of money on is really. It feels hard. It almost felt hard asking for permission to come back and see it. And I was like, man, I wish I could just stay here like for a weekend and be like, do we really like this place or not? Because man, you don't want buyer's remorse. And I just think it seems super doable for apartments to do that. Because a lot of times they have the guest suite for a lot of these luxury properties. So, but I've not yet heard of someone's doing a try before you buy offer. But I bet if you were put that out there, I bet your conversion rate would significantly increase. Right. Or interviewing those people afterwards to tell you why they're not buying. Like, oh, I just learned this. It's like, okay, that's good to know. Now, how can I address that in my messaging?
I like that one a lot. And I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't know if logistics is the right way but just onboarding and offboarding. I'm trying to think. But the first question is has anybody even floated that? You think at this point
had to, but I've just not heard it.
Yeah, I haven't heard it either. That's why I think it's really interesting. And then I'm thinking, what would be the 5 things somebody would immediately say this can't, why this wouldn't work or you couldn't do it, and then punch holes in that, see if it's actually that unrealistic.
And there are ways you could do it even at your property that may be almost like around we can't use the guest room or whatever, the guest suite because X, Y, Z. It's like, okay, which property do you have that accepts some Airbnbs? Like that has some of that already on the books. It's like, just, pay for their weekend in an Airbnb. It costs you a few $100, but like, let's say it costs you $500. Like we've seen most of the people now going through the leasing process that they're paying like, in fact, a locator, right? Locators are charging like 4 to 6 weeks of rent. So you're paying like $3,000 to $4,500 for a locator. It's like, I'd take a swing on $500. And even if it was like, it takes us two try before I buys before someone moves in. It's like, okay, so that's $1,000,
Yeah. If you can make that net neutral the way you're kind of describing, that would be one of the biggest ones to, because of course the owner's like, well, that's my inventory. Like, and if I'm going to lose money on it, I'm not going to do it. But yeah, if you could, neutralize that just based on like hotel cost type thing, then, why not?
Yeah.
You got the wheels turning.
Particularly like if you think like we've noticed a lot of people moving, a lot of our campaigns do better with relocators. Right. And so imagine if you, especially if you offered this for people that were relocating to the market, because a lot of them will come in, if they don't do buy sight unseen, they will be like, I'm going to tour 6 properties. It's like, oh, I hear you. Why don't you stay at ours? We have this guest room or whatever. You can stay and you can try us out during. And of course, you just give them a little bit more coddling. Like you let the property manager know, like when they're there, it's like, make sure that they,
totally
know which restaurants to get food from, like whatever. You have this like little, just like an Airbnb does. It's like you have your little booklet of like, here's what I recommend you do. This is going to buy you so much goodwill,
No, for sure.